sharing our stories connects us. Listen and be connected. Join us for the conversation meeting weekly at the intersection of community and culture. Hosted by Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter. And Joe King Carter. It's Joe, J-O-E, King, K-I-N-G, Carter, C-A-R-T-E-R. And the way we say it, you have to pronounce it that way because otherwise it sounds like you're saying Joking Carter. And this Joe King Carter doesn't joke around. Hi everybody, my name is Mario Nunez, and I'm seated alongside my broadcast partner,
Joe King Carter.
Yeah, not Joking Carter because he doesn't.
Joe will work.
Or King. I call him King.
Just
because
don't call me late for dinner.
There you go. Although we have a story about that as well. But listen, you're listening to WMNF 88.5 FM, WMNF.org. If you're listening from any place that you happen to be presently in the world, it is noon, just past noon on Wednesday, hump day as it usually is every day. You know, Joey, these weeks are coming at us like a runaway freight train going downhill with no brakes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Feels like we were here about 2 or 3, maybe 4 days ago, but it was actually 7.
Mm-hmm. Well, time is relative. Albert Einstein proved that. So, I think your perceptual mechanism for time is very weird. Because,
it is strange. It is strange.
Compresses.
Joey,
it compresses as you get older.
Have you ever? Yes, it does. Yeah. Because a wise man told me once, Sydney, man bagging my groceries at Publix, told me once, as he was bagging my groceries, as I said, he says to me, "Hey," he says, I got a joke for you. I said, "Okay, Sydney, what you got?" He says, life is like a roll of toilet paper. And I looked at him and I said, "How so, Sydney?" He says, "The closer you get to the end, the faster it goes." Oh. And he was right. And that's the perception you're talking about. Because, the sun tracks...
I was concerned about that entire metaphor.
Roll of toilet paper. The sun tracks through the sky daily at the same rate of speed every day, all day. But you don't really realize how fast it's traversing the sky until it hits the horizon and drops out of sight. An airplane traveling in the air is traveling at a pretty high rate of speed, which you don't have any feel for that until you get closer to the ground. Right. And then you realize how fast everything's going by.
I was actually not joking when I said it's perceptual. It is perceptual, even though there is a reality involved in measuring time. How you see it is a very important part of your life.
Let me ask you this, Joey. Have you ever had a type of a procedure, let's say oral surgery comes to mind? Because, you get put down for a period of 10, 12 minutes, let's say, while they do whatever they're doing. Let's just call it an extraction of a tooth for the lack of a better procedure. And then all of a sudden, you wake up a few minutes later and you look at the technician and you go, "Hey, you're going to do this because, I got to go. I got things that I got to do." Whilst you have a bag of ice on your face because the extraction has already been accomplished. But for those 10 minutes that you were down under, you lost track of time.
Time flies.
When you're asleep or when you're having fun.
There you go.
But time is all relative. Hey, man, what's on your mind this week, Joey? Since last week, anything come across your radar?
I do have something I want to briefly talk about. And I know that what we do here on this show is we get involved in personal narratives and cultural connections. And that was the intention of this show's design in the beginning, always.
And still is.
And there are other shows that are doing marvelous jobs, public affairs shows at bringing you amazing information about local and state government and even national news. And so, I was listening this morning to Shelley Reback's Midpoint.
That's right.
I'm a big fan of the show.
Great show.
I'm a big fan of Shelley.
And a big fan of Shelley's producer as well.
Absolutely. And the show is an amazing show. I recommend it to everyone, please. And today they were talking about vaccinations. And, the feelings I have about the fact that this administration of the state of Florida is trying to drag us back into the 19th century is it's harrowing at the least, and it's disturbing, and it's just as somebody who's a good old Florida boy who grew up in Florida. Who is now an older gentleman.
An old chap.
I remember Florida.
The way she used to be?
Yeah, I remember Florida in a very different way. And it's just it's horrible to see this happen. People are going to die because of what's happening in our state, because of vaccinations and the information we're spreading, the ignorant information about.
How do you turn your back on science?
It's an amazing thing.
How do you turn your back on science?
Here's what I want to say. Because I am of a certain age, even though every day I wake up, I think I'm 30 years old. I remember in my childhood the most horrible image I had ever seen as a child. And I saw some pretty rough stuff as a kid, by the way. And the most horrible image was not a monster in a movie. It was not some crime scene in a newspaper. It was people in iron lungs.
Yeah.
It was people in iron lungs. And
polio was in full swing.
Polio was in full swing. Most of those people in iron lungs were young.
Yes, children.
My father was in a wheelchair. He was wheelchair bound. ADA had not happened. Access to public spaces was pretty difficult in most cases.
Limited.
And his life was therefore torturous because he was bound in a wheelchair. And so for me, I knew that experience on a day-to-day basis, what it means to be limited and imprisoned in that way. And the images of people laying in iron lungs with their heads sticking out.
And looking through the mirror, remember? Because that was the image. They saw the world through that.
And that
mirror.
That scared me profoundly.
Yeah, of course.
And of course, it scared my mother. Now, my mother was a person who was the chief parent of my childhood, and she wanted to know what vaccinations were about. And she could have been someone today that might have been skewed and taken into the wrong direction. Yeah, she wasn't really big on. She was a kind of a naturalist, homeopathic kind of person. She wasn't big on this, and so she did all the research. And here's what she discovered: I love my child and I want to protect him. And in that sense, I'm going to certainly do this because this is what science is telling me is the right thing to do. And that is what sticks in my mind. And today I may be someone who never suffered from polio because of the decision that she made. And when I see what is happening now, that we are going to abandon vaccinations at any level in the state of Florida, is just, it astounds me.
What's happening to our home state? That's for another conversation.
Yes,
but to your point, and it's not just about what your mother was thinking, Honey Howden, what your mother was thinking about, I love my child.
That's right.
But if you loved your child, then you should love all children, and you want to keep all children safe, not just your child.
Of course.
Because if your child is going to school with other children,
right,
there's also the problem there that there's going to be exposure and possible illness.
Well, that's where it's going to occur.
Yeah.
If you don't want your child to have any ill health effects, keep them away from other children, and you can't do that. That's not what you want to do. You want your child to be socialized normally, so in a fashion that's healthy, let's say.
And maybe one day we could talk about homeschooling and homeschooling versus schooling in public school or even private school and voucher schools, but just where you keep your children away from other children exclusively. So we're gonna tack away from that only because we could do that for an hour.
Of course we could. And let me just say this very quickly.
Absolutely.
This is not just me making an observation and walking away.
Right.
Folks, voting resistance. This is what we must do now. We cannot just sit back on our haunches and wait for others to do the work. So please, everyone, these issues are issues that we all need to be involved in.
The cavalry ain't going. I think what Joey is saying, if I can speak for you, Joey, the cavalry ain't coming because the cavalry is us.
The cavalry is us. Okay. That's good. I like that.
All right. I like that too.
Yeah.
And so, Joey, with that said, as we do each and every week, our guest in studio, because again, we are the conversation, meeting weekly at the intersection of community and culture.
Yes.
Who is our guest this week? Joey.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I'm looking forward to this show. So to lay a little background, I want everyone to know that, of course, we are celebrating Latino Hispanic Month here at WMNF, as we are throughout the country. And so we have tried to, last week we had Mike Beluja, who is a local Tampeño, who is of Latino descent, who's a great, incredible musician. And so at the beginning of the conversation, way back over a year ago, when we began, you interviewed me.
I did.
And
you shared some personal stuff that was really touching,
and
compelling.
And so, thank you. And so we did that. And so we have decided that in the honor of Latino Month and with it's a family affair kind of attitude that we do here all the time, that we're going to interview somebody here at WMNF, and that's going to be Mario Nunez.
Let's go!
Hey,
Let's
baby.
go! I'm ready.
So I want you to know that from this moment forward, I drive the bus.
You do.
And you are just the passenger.
I know.
And so...
I'm not sure I'm good with that. But listen, I'm still manning the phone. So we'll give you that number in just a little bit if you'd like to call in and join us here on the conversation and wish me a happy birthday, because that's happening on Saturday. But Joey...
Happy birthday. Let me be the first here on
Thank
there.
you, my brother. Thank you. 67 on Saturday. But I like yourself. I feel 35 also.
Yeah, of course.
Until I bend over to tie my shoes. But here we go.
Yeah.
I'm figuratively handing the steering wheel over to you.
Okay, very good. So you are the guest that's doing a little work. So we're going to start our show off the way we always do, and I'm going to ask you this. Where were you born?
I was born right here in Tampa, Florida. Right here in Tampa, Florida, 1958, September 20, at the old St. Joseph's Hospital. And I say the old St. Joseph's Hospital like a lot of people will refer to the old Jefferson High School.
Right.
I said high school, hospital. It was on 7th Avenue, on the east end of 7th, close west of Nebraska, west of Nebraska, close to, I want to say Madison Avenue. But the footprint is still there, although I think it's being redeveloped presently.
Right.
But that was the first iteration of St. Joseph's Hospital. We later, it expanded later, became what is now Baycare, which is St. Joseph's on the corner of Havana and Martin Luther King.
And I'm going to say that I'm hoping today that I'm going to learn some things. I know your life very well, but let's talk a little about who your family was and your siblings and your parents. Talk about that.
Two older brothers born in New York City. My parents, my father was born here in Tampa, Florida, in Ybor City in 1928 by midwife Maria Messina. She delivered half of Ybor City back in the early 20th century. There were two Sicilian midwives that were in charge of that operation. My mother was born in Ponce, in Puerto Rico. She went with her family to New York as a baby, really, 1 year old. They grew up. So my father then in 1934 immigrated to New York. The legend has it my grandfather was not a good cigar roller, and my grandmother, although she worked in the cigar industry here as everybody did, they moved to New York. A lot of Tampeños migrated on the Silver Bullet, the Silver Meteor. Forgive me, the Silver Bullet. That's a beer that brewed in Colorado on the Silver Meteor. So they beat that path between Union Station and Grand Central Station in New York.
Very common.
And so as a result, they grew up in New York. They married there at a post WW2 block party in 1946. 2 years later, in 48, were married, and my two older brothers were born in New York. In 51, they came back home because, we had one aunt. I had one aunt, tia abuela, who was a good cigar roller, and she was a good earner. And so she anchored the family here. The rest of the family went to New York. So that's why my father, to this day, is a Yankees fan. And then in 51, they kind of started to filter back, poco a poco, as we say in the neighborhood, came back to Tampa. And that's why I was born.
So let's say just for the audience. So they were married in 48. You said?
48,
and they are married today.
My parents are still alive, and for those of you that know me personally, you know what a challenge it is to have a 97 and 95-year-old parent that's still kicking and still running. I mean, and they live with me and my wife, and we are taking care of them, and it's the joy of my life. It's the work of my life presently.
Yes.
But I fully expect and suspect that the reason they're still here is because of the kindness and the love that we're still giving them.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so they've been married 77 years.
77 years.
Look that up, ladies and gentlemen, because they don't keep statistics on that. And I bet you don't know anybody who has been married that long who is even 97 and 95 years old. We just lost Robert Redford yesterday.
Yes.
Who was only 89. And I say only 89 because I live with my parents who are, I'm looking at 95 and 97 every day.
Yeah.
So anything, 84,
sobering.
88 is that's a whippersnapper.
Yeah. Well, absolutely.
I'm sorry.
I know your parents, and I think that entire situation is awesome and interesting, and I love the idea of it.
And they have great stories too because they've lived so long.
Right,
Joey, you amassed some stories when you lived that long.
Oh, absolutely. So they come back here. Your brothers also. Your brothers and you are separated in age.
We are. They were born 22 months apart, and honeymoon baby. I told my father the first time he went in there and did his business, bang, he had pay dirt. And so and all you have to do is the math. They were married April 10th, 1948. My brother was born January 22nd, 1949. Wow. That's 9 months.
Yeah.
So then after that, 22 months later, my middle brother came, and then I think my father started to hit the brakes on the whole operation because here they are very young, 22 and 20 years old, and they've got 2 children.
2 babies, yeah, it's a lot.
And they're just kids themselves.
Right.
So they're struggling a little bit at the early days to get things up and going.
But then...
Well, the way the story was told to me always was that my mom, because she was third in a succession of Marias, right? So there was she's Carmen Maria. My grandmother was Maria Hortensia, or I think that was my great grandmother, and my grandmother was Maria Encarnacion. So anyway, she wanted to kind of keep that thing going,
right?
And she was hoping for a little girl, so they went back in with intention this time, right? They went mining, and hit
to create a girl,
hit pay dirt again,
yes.
But as in those days, because technology was not available, they had to wait till it's a boy. So then you hurry down to the gift shop and buy the cigars and pass those out with the blue tags on them.
Yeah.
And they didn't have a name picked out.
Right.
They didn't have a name picked out. So they changed the feminine A to an O, and instead of Maria, they got Mario. And they didn't know what to call. They didn't have a name picked out. So they said, what do we get? His middle name? Oh, he looks like his middle brother. I know. Let's give him the same middle name his middle brother does. So I'm Mario Roberto, as my brother's Fernando Roberto. My parents were creative back in those days, weren't they?
All right.
Not so much.
Most parents were doing odd things with names, and usually traditional. So, and by the way,
7 and 9 years difference.
I get this because I think my mother, honey, I think she wanted a girl too. So
it would have been easier for her, probably.
Yeah, a lot of things probably. Those icky boys, and so
they have cooties.
And so now you're here,
yeah,
and. What begins to happen in your neighborhood as you grow up as a young boy?
So my brothers were both in parochial school. They went to OLPH while we lived in Ybor City, and then we moved way out past West Tampa, way out to like Lois and 275 right there, just west of Dale Mabry, between Dale Mabry and Lois. So then we became we were in the Grady Elementary School District and Coleman Junior High, although my brothers went to Wilson, and then they were Plant Panthers. By the time I got to high school, they built a brand new school on Cypress Street, and they named it Jefferson High School, right?
And that area out there was very different back then, I'm assuming.
It was. It wasn't quite the West Shore district that we know now.
Right.
It was a lot more pedestrian in a lot of ways, and it was always 33609, that zip code, and all of that, Culbreth Isle and Beach Park, and that was always the well-heeled, right, and the Euphemistic Crew folks and all that good stuff, and they live out on the fingers and all that. Those were my classmates in school. But we were in a middle class neighborhood.
Right.
A lot of people in our neighborhood were the people that left Ybor City, and either they went to Carrollwood or they came out to where we were. So I had a lot of people in my neighborhood whose parents had graduated from the old Jefferson,
right,
who remain my friends today.
Yeah. As I drive through the neighborhoods of West Tampa, going from around the University of Tampa all the way out to Dale Mabry, I can almost pick out each house that I think was the residents were once in Ybor. There's something about the way they landscape their house. They put these objects, they put these Catholic items in there, in the yard. And
the lions are guarding the front door, the big lions are guarding the castle.
I could pick it out. There's a sense that they moved up, moving on up. There's a sense of that.
Well, my parents were in the Ponce de Leon housing projects at the time when my brothers were little, and then ultimately they moved out and bought their home, their starter home, 2-bedroom, 1-bath home. And it was very humble, and then they added a bedroom, and they stayed there for 65 years. I mean, they never moved. My father was not one to be adventurous and move about. Well, which is good in one way, because then you really, really do grow those deep roots, and you know the neighborhood, and your friends are usually your friends for life because you know all those people.
Yeah.
But I surely would have liked to have maybe tried some different. I was always a little more adventurous, and I think that's what led me to my career ultimately, because I wanted to move around.
Well, before we get to that, let's talk about you as a boy growing up. And we have on this show many, many times talked about, somehow alluded to the fact that you are a true sports fan, and I am not. And I think that's okay because I think we offer two different perspectives.
Of course it is.
But I certainly appreciate the fact that people are sports fans. And therefore, let's talk about your life as being sort of
a little guy
moving into the sport, because I think it was a big part of your childhood, wasn't it?
100%, because I had, again, two brothers, 7 and 9 years older. So by the time I'm 5 years old, my middle brother's 12 and my oldest brother's 14. So, they've already been playing Little League Baseball for 3, 4, 5 years. And so baseball was kind of a theme in my family. And as a result, I'm the little guy, so anything you can do, I can do better. And I was tripping over baseball bats, and I knew how to throw and catch and all those things at a real early age. And if it was round and it bounced, I chased after it. It was one of those days, like a dog, I guess, thinking of it that way. So, yes, I did, and it helped me, be coordinated and physically fit. And, I was never challenged by anything athletically, whatever that required, whatever that was. So I appreciate the fact that it was not emphasized, but it was available to me as a child.
Right. So what you're saying is the best part of sports, getting away from whatever negative criticism there may be, the best parts are that it's character building. It helps you understand
how to work in a team setting,
all that stuff.
How to be a team captain. I was talking to my brother about this the other day, and it's funny because we both kind of had the same experience. Even though I was undersized, I'm not a big fella now. I was undersized when I was in grade school. Whenever we went out to PE and we split up and we picked teams, either the PE coach selected me to be one of the team captains to pick the teams, or I was one of the first ones picked on a team. You follow what I'm saying?
Sure.
And I prided myself on that. I was like, okay, if I'm not the captain where I'm picking the team, I couldn't hide in the back and go, oh, where's Mario? I'm gonna hide him and pick him last.
Right.
I was one of the first ones picked, which lent itself to giving you confidence as a kid. You follow what I'm saying? So, in the classroom, I always performed. I just never thought anything that I couldn't do. I always knew that I could do whatever I wanted to do.
Right. And had you been a physically bigger person,
it might have been a different outcome.
You might have tried to be a professional sports person.
There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah,
I loved to compete. I hated to lose. I was pretty smart on the athletic pitch. I knew strategy and so forth. I was just undersized, man. And I knew, if I had to make a throw from the hole at short to first base, I had to throw from my culito, which is a long way from first to, short to first, where a guy who's 6'2", 6'3", it's just physics, man. It's just physics.
Right. Well, we don't see a lot of professional athletes who are small
that are my size.
Yeah.
And just like you don't see a lot of jockeys who are 6'4", 220.
Well, yeah, there you go.
I mean, each sport has its unique characteristics. Gymnasts, Olympic gymnasts. I probably could have been a good gymnast if somebody put me in that, because
that world.
My strength for my size, I've always been a pretty strong kid.
Right.
So strong young man. So that would have worked. You see gymnasts, they're all 5'6", 5'7", maybe 5'8", but not much bigger. Right? So anyway, that said, I enjoyed my time, and I'm grateful that I was exposed to all of that early.
And which high school did you graduate?
I'm a Dragon. Once a Dragon.
Jefferson Dragon.
Always a Dragon.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And
those Dragons watching out there today.
Yeah, and you're still very involved even to this day.
I am. I mean, it's, again, that was part of my personality as a kid growing up. I made friends. I made friends for life. And it's funny. It's really funny because I went 1 through 9 with the kids that went to Grady and Coleman. So those were all my playmates and my classmates growing up. I mean, not the formative years, but leading up to the formative year, adolescence. And then I get to high school, and I'm exposed to a whole new batch of kids. A whole new batch I went from Palmacia and Colbert Isles to West Tampa and Carver City and Lincoln Gardens.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that opportunity and for that exposure, because even to this day, I still know all of those kids.
That's right. So how do you think you would have been perceived in high school by not everyone, but most people? How were you seen? Gregarious, friendly,
gregarious, friendly, outgoing, leadership, certainly. Maybe a little spoiled, maybe a little boo-boo spoiled. You know what I mean? Maybe a little full of himself.
Because you were kind of the baby. And
I was the baby of 3 boys, but I was also, a little cocky. You know what I mean? A little bit like, look, I was my.
Do you think that's left?
No. So that's the other thing. Let me share with you. Good one, Joey. Let me share with you that, and I know this because I live with my parents. I alluded to this at the top of the show. They're 95 and 97 years of age. You don't change. For those of you that are out there listening right now, you don't really change. You will become older and maybe less
wiser
and wiser, hopefully, certainly,
Yes.
and a little less than. But your core personality changes. If you were a shy young girl, you're probably going to be a shy older lady. If you were a pain in the neck little guy, you're probably going to be still that cantankerous pain in the neck old man.
Right.
I'm just saying your personality does not. Your core personality doesn't change. If you were charming as a young kid, you're probably charming as an older man.
Right.
If you were sickly as a girl, you might be sickly or, kind of tend to sickliness as an older person.
Yeah.
That said,
You're
how
saying
would
that
people have seen me in high school? I think to this day when I go to the reunions and I see my friends, they're happy to see me genuinely because they tell me. They do
Well,
tell
that's
me.
nice.
They tell me, they say, Mario, yeah, of course it is. They tell me, Mario,
Right.
you never change. You don't
Right.
change.
Yeah.
And I try not to.
Okay.
I try to be kind. I try to be the same person that I was in high
Yes.
school.
Yeah.
Accepting of all people.
Yes.
And talk to everybody. From Willie the this is going to sound kind of funky, but from Willie the Wino to William the CEO, give them all respect, man, because everybody's got a story. You don't know what shoes they're walking in until you have a chance to learn that story.
Amen, brother.
And just be kind. And
Yes,
the
sir.
older I get, the more I lead with that.
Yes.
Maybe when I was younger and full of piss and vinegar, as they say, and I guess I maybe shouldn't have said that on the air, but full of that stuff,
Yes.
right? You have a little chip on your shoulder, and maybe you get a little too much testosterone raging,
Right.
But then as you get older and you kind of mellow, you realize, okay, let's take a different tack,
Yes.
and see people and civilization and society as it is.
So we are at the bottom of the hour. We're gonna have a little information coming your way, and then afterwards we're gonna get you out of high school and get you on to the rest of your life.
Love that.
Hi, I'm Mike Baluja, and you're listening to The Conversation with Mario Nunez and Joe King Carter on WMNF 88.5 FM in Tampa.
And here we.
In honor of Hispanic heritage and culture, this is a Mike Baluja original.
Through the veins of Ybor City run the varied breeds and bloods. That's the way it came together. That's the way it always was. Take a trip down 7th Avenue. Watch the miracle unfold. A city rich with hidden treasures, a million stories to be told. Ybor City's in my heart. It's got a place inside my soul. It will be that way forever, and I will never let it go. I'll never let it go. I'll never let it go. I'll never let it go. I'm in love with Ybor City, and with its bold and brilliant past. The buildings, homes, the streets, the people. This is a love that's gonna last. Yes, Ybor City's in my heart. It's got a place inside my soul, and it will be that way forever. No, I will never let it go. Never, never, never. I'll never let it go. Never, 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 never let it go. I'll never let it go. I'll never let it go.
Yeah, there we go. How can you not feel good after listening to that? So I just want to say, as the new bus driver today, I'm not normally doing this, that if you would like to send us a text, please do at 813-433-0885. Also, you can send an email at dj@wmnf.org. And also, if you would like to call in and ask Mario a question, our guest today, it is 813-239-9663. So there we go. Now we have.
Wasn't that a good song, man?
Oh, that's just so sweet.
That was in the style of a bolero. For those of you that are wondering what that music genre was, that's a bolero. That's where you pull your sweetie in close and you kind of dance real.
Yeah,
you get
yeah.
up in there and you just, what cologne
Yeah.
are you wearing, baby? I don't know, but that's bolero.
Yeah,
Mike Baluha. I mean, it's amazing.
In Anglo world, it would be either the slow dance or the waltz.
The slow drag.
I used
as
to
it
do
were.
a lot of waltzing, by the way, and I love the waltz. So now you're out of high school,
Yes, sir.
and you're moving on into the adult world. And what happens next?
Little by little. So for I had a dalliance with the sport, the grand sport of Hialeah. I mentioned baseball earlier. Once my baseball dreams kind of faded a little bit, I played men's fast pitch softball. I transferred that energy for baseball into men's fast pitch softball, which in the late 70s here in Tampa and in the Bay Area and in Sarasota and Bradenton as well, was really we had some tournaments at Palmasola Playground where they had the fields there, beautiful 4 fields. And, men's fast pitch softball was a grand game, but it started to fade in the early 80s because we ran out of pitching, and then slow pitch softball came in. In that interim, I was introduced on my 18th birthday to what would later become my mistress, the game of Hialeah.
Yes.
And I fell in love with it. I fell hard for it, and I still pine for it today. I watch it on YouTube, and it was just wonderful. And I happened to be fortunate enough to work at Hialeah in with the players.
Mm-hmm.
So sort of like a clubhouse attendant in baseball. So I was up close and personal.
And tell folks where this was.
This was right here in Tampa, Florida, on the corner of just south of Dale Mabry and Gandy Boulevard. The building no longer exists. Shamefully, we tore it down for a Home Depot and a Sam's. And then, of course, the Sam's went out of business. So, I mean, just horrible. Miami still has their beautiful fronton. We lost ours. They could have turned it into a casino, but I digress. So then after that, I kind of trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I was going to Hillsborough Community College. A lot of my friends were up at Florida and Florida State, and they had moved on, University of South Florida, certainly. And I was still trying to figure out where I was going to go and what I was going to do.
Very good. Now, at this moment, I know that we have a caller waiting. Whatever needs to happen, let's make that happen.
It's happened already. And Mike in Sarasota, what do you got to say for yourself, sir?
Well, I heard one of your hosts, I believe it was Joe King Carter, say that the current administration of Florida is trying to take us back to the 19th century, and I think he was speaking reference to vaccines. But I read the paper this morning, and one of the headlines is that Florida sheriffs across the state have now decided that they can no longer enforce open carry laws. And so I predict, then, and this gets to Ybor City and to your now guest, that what we're going to see in Ybor City very soon is people openly carrying. And I predict further that this is going to lead to other people openly carrying, and I predict further this is going to lead to other people not openly carrying, but more likely to be carrying concealed weapons. And so I just wanted to ask, I guess you two, I think both of you, what do you think the effect of this open carry will be on Ybor City and even the rest of Tampa?
Great question, Mike. We're going to take you off the air and answer your question. Go ahead, Joe. You
Yeah,
get a first
Mike.
crack at it. I want to talk.
Yeah, that's a great question, Mike, and it's a significant issue. Of course, we live in a culture in which we've eroticized guns, and so yeah, it's not going to be good for Tampa and Ybor City. Ybor City already fights a kind of image about guns and shootings and things. So I just think that it's going to have that impact.
It's going to nothing good is going to come from it, Mike. I think that it's going to lead to something that a term we used to use on the baseball field. Ironically enough, it's a Spanish word, and the word is tiroteo. Tiroteo in Spanish is like a shootout, right? Or when you see a baseball team that can't complete a play successfully defensively and they're throwing the ball all around the field, errantly, it's called tiroteo in Spanish, where I grew up in West Tampa and the leagues I played in. But yeah, it's going to lead to probably a lot of that stuff. Mistaken identity, you brandish your weapon, he brandishes his weapon, there's going to be crossfire, people are going to die. It's going to be worse than the Wild West because, as we know, in the Wild West, when you rode up into a town out there in Deadwood, Arizona, the sheriff met you at the city limits and at the town limits, and you had to check your guns. Mm-hmm. You check your guns before you go to the saloon, partner. You want to get yourself a whiskey, and you want to go down to the brothel, or you want to go get a bath in the bathhouse. Check your weapons. We don't have to check your weapons anymore. In fact, we have more weapons. So to answer your question, nothing good is going to come from that. But thank you always for listening, Mike. You're a wonderful listener, and we appreciate you always giving us something to think about.
Yes. Now, so you have had this
young adulthood
moment in your young adulthood with softball and highlight, and now
sports.
What happens next?
So I've got to figure a path, right? I can't not have a direction in which to climb out of from whence I came.
Right.
So I tried to use my skill set. I always had a friendly and affable personality and helpful and wanting to help. That was always a part of my profile as well. So for a minute, I was in the hospitality industry, right? I worked at the hotel. Mm-hmm. I was a bellman. So, I would go to the airport and I'd pick up the crews that stayed at the hotel with us, the airline crews that were overnighting in Tampa. And little by little, I got familiar with their lifestyle because I was working with them every single day, whether it was Delta Airlines, Northwest Airlines, Pan Am. They would stay at our hotel. And so, they got to talking to me, and the girls would say, hey, you got a great personality. Maybe you should try. You should, apply. We're hiring. Delta's hiring, or Northwest is hiring. And I had an aunt that worked with Eastern Airlines for a long, long time, and she was in reservations with them. And I knew kind of the perks and how fun it was that, on a weekend you could fly to New Orleans and have dinner and stay overnight and come back the next day.
Right.
And it wouldn't cost that much. And at this time, seats were available on the airplane.
Right.
So, all at once, it kind of clicked. Finished up at HCC, and I thought, I took a class at USF, but I still was not satisfied. Mm-hmm. I wanted to travel. I wanted to get off the block, man. Mm-hmm. I wanted to go see what was going on in L.A. and New York and maybe Toronto or Mexico City. I just wanted to fly away. Mm-hmm. So I did. I joined the airlines in 1984.
And when in there did you get married?
Yes, well, I was just going to, Joey, thank you for doing that because my beautiful wife.
I'm just trying to get the chronology.
She's in studio, I know, exactly.
Yeah.
So
she's here and she's watching.
Yeah, and she's listening. So September 7th of 1980, which just passed 2 weeks ago, we celebrated our 45th anniversary. So in 1980, I got married. So I kind of did it like that.
So both of these were happening at the same time?
More or less, right? So I was trying to figure out what I was going to do. I ended up falling in love and getting married, and then at that point I was still a little bit restless. Still wanted to figure out, I still wanted to travel,
right?
And Sally was willing to come with me. We were at that point. It was like, okay, let's do what we're going to do and build it together. In '83, our oldest son was born. I'm still in pursuit of my airline career. And then in 84, I finally get the opportunity. I was hired by American Airlines. So pack your bags, son. You're going to Chicago.
And so what was that like? I mean, that must have been...
I loved it. I loved it.
Emotionally an amazing kind of moment in your life because...
It truly was.
Few jobs offer you that.
It truly was. Well, I got to fly away. I literally
Yeah.
got to fly away.
Right.
And I got paid for traveling for 30 years. I did this for 30 years. The downside was I was so close to my family, as you know, as I've described to you, that I had to leave my nuclear family, like my mom, my father, and my grandparents were still alive at the time, my grandmother who raised me. So I didn't want to really leave my grandmother's side because I knew she was getting older and I loved her so very much. But she did tell me, she said, listen, you got to go start your life, son. You know, in Spanish, of course.
Right.
Mijo, you got to go do what you've got to do. So with her blessing, I went.
Right.
And
And did that mean that you could not just remain in Tampa forever? You had to move some.
Correct. Well, and the airlines, if anybody knows anything about the airlines business, it's all predicated on seniority. And when you're junior, you don't have much say.
Right.
You go where they send you, and if you don't like that, you can leave it, you know, and if not, then just do what you need to do, keep your head down, and hopefully, gratefully, this was just after deregulation in 1979, so airlines were hiring at a tremendous rate. So I wasn't junior very long. There was a great number of flight attendants that came behind me that pushed me up in the seniority rosters, so that I was able to then pick and choose.
And so where did you and Sally and the boys move to, and which cities did you live in?
Great question. We started in Chicago. Alex was but about 20 months old when we went to Chicago. We were there for 5 years 1 year. Did you hear that, y'all? We were there for 5 years 1 year. Actually, it was 1 year, but it felt like 5 because that was some serious cold that we experienced.
Right.
And this boy who grew up on Clearwater Beach with, white sand between his toes, was not feeling that winter.
Yeah.
And if I could have just survived maybe another couple of winters, we might have stayed longer because Chicago is an amazing, amazing city, right?
Indeed.
It's the Midwest ethic with everything New York has to offer.
Yes.
Except when they bump into you in the, excuse me, partner, whatever that is, it's Midwest.
I like Chicago a
And
lot,
Chicago's got a tremendous, we're talking about Hispanic culture, tremendous Hispanic, the Mexican community is live and vibrant in Chicago. Of course, the Polish are there and the German and so on and so forth, and the Italian. But Chicago, two baseball teams, a football team, a basketball team, hockey. It's got it all. Food, culture, history. But anyway, I digress.
But it was too cold.
It was too cold. So, and at the time, we didn't fly directly from Chicago to TIA, Tampa International Airport. So I probably would have stayed longer had I been able to get home more directly. Right? But I had to go all day. I had to go to Dallas, and then from Dallas back to Tampa. It was just exhausting.
Wow. And so what was the next city?
The next city was DFW, Dallas-Fort Worth. And that's where our youngest boy was born in 86. And then we stayed there for about 15 years. And that was kind of fun because, we bought a house brand new. We saw it being built. We saw the foundation being poured. And we moved into a brand new community where it was brand new. The elementary school, the junior high school, the high school, brand new. It was in the south part of the Metroplex there, south of 20. For those of you that know anything about it, Grand Prairie was the name of the city. And we lived there for 15 years until we came back to Tampa. But I'll tell you what, we were there during the best years because we were there in the decade of the 90s. And the only down thing I could think about was the Oklahoma City bombing that was really, really tragic when we were there because it was kind of tragic. But we were there for the 3 Super Bowls of the Dallas Cowboys, 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, speaking of sports that you give a damn less about, Joey.
But that's quite, for someone who grew up in a town like Tampa and Ybor City, where you're steeped in history.
Yes.
And then to go to, you said, a brand new town.
Brand new.
The town, what was it called? Prairie?
Grand Prairie. Grand Prairie, Texas.
They were literally building out this neighborhood as you moved there.
They really were. Now, Dallas, of course, was Dallas, and Fort Worth was Fort Worth. But, the Metroplex kept expanding, right? Expanding and swallowing up more ground and more territory.
Right.
And one of the new communities, bedroom communities, is like Temple Terraces to Tampa, was this area called Grand Prairie. And we bought a new home. D.R. Horton, I think, was our builder, I'm not sure. I can't remember exactly.
But were you in those years with all of that good stuff that was happening?
Yes,
you're raising your family, you've got
sir.
a great job. Were you missing? What was the missing of Ybor and Tampa like? What was that?
Great question. Great question. We're going to run out of time here real fast.
I know.
But that's okay. That's okay. And the Tampa Native show's coming up pretty soon. We'll talk about that. I can tell you this. Let me button it up this way for you, Joey. That whenever my aircraft landed in Tampa, at Tampa International Airport, whether I was coming home to see family or whether I was laying over as an active working flight attendant, and they opened that door, and that humidity hit you in the face. And the smell of the salt air, it got in my nostrils, as it were. And if you were lucky enough in the parking lot, you heard that seagull cackle.
Right.
And we all know what that sounds like.
Yes.
I knew I was home.
Yeah.
So that was a calling for me. And then, of course, if I would get in the car and I'd drive to Ybor City and I'd go to La Segunda Central and I'd get a Cuban sandwich and a cup of café con leche, then I was really home.
I see.
Those were the things that I was missing, right? So in Texas, of course, they have a tremendous Hispanic cultural heritage. Texas was Mexico before it was Texas, let us not forget.
Right.
So, I assimilated to that because my great-grandfather was from Veracruz in Mexico. So I have Mexican blood in me, right? I mean, it's only 2 generations ago. My grandfather's nickname was Mexicano, Mexican, Abuelo Mexicano, because he looked just like his father, my great-grandfather, who was born in Veracruz. But I had to keep telling people over and over again, no. I'm Puerto Rican and Cuban. We eat beans. We just don't smash them and refry them. We put them over rice and call it a day.
Right.
It was fun, though. It was fun. I had a good time in Texas. I don't really have too many bad memories.
And then from Texas to?
Tampa, Florida. Came home.
And you've been here since?
Yeah, and it's hard to believe, but we lived in Texas for 15 years, and I've been now home we came home 2 days before Noche Buena, which is the 24th of December. We came home 22nd December 1999, just before Y2K. Remember Y2K?
Yes,
when the world was going to come to an end.
That's right.
And that was 26 years ago already.
Wow.
So what's the takeaway, y'all, if you're listening out there, and you don't want to call in, that's fine. If you don't want to wish me a happy birthday, that's fine. 813-239-9663. It's fine. I'll get over it. But I'll tell you this, Joey, time does go fast.
Sure
and,
does.
and if there's one thing that I could, they always ask you, well, what would today's Mario Nunez tell, 25-year-old Mario Nunez?
Right.
What would he advise him? Man, just realize how fast it plan.
Yeah.
Make a plan and work the plan.
But you never do. Because when you're young, you're that...
Young, dumb, and full of
you're
enthusiasm.
You're far away from the end. And as the end gets closer, the time gets a little more compressed.
I think that we may have an email, maybe. Somebody wants to wish me happy birthday on email. Or just have a short story to share.
Eugene Bell says happy birthday, and he turned 67 also on Saturday.
There you go, another 1958 baby. Happy birthday. On Saturday? So we share a birthday. Oh, Eugene, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
Just
nice.
this morning, here, full disclosure, just this morning, as I do every Wednesday before the show, I go into La Segunda Central on the corner of 15th and 15th, and I walk in, and today, Andrea's behind the counter, cute as a bug. She's 24 years old, and 23 now, and she's just behind the counter, and she's always a bundle of energy and joy and sunshine, and she sees me, and she waves at me, Mario, and she knows I come in on Wednesdays. Why? Because they get paid on Wednesdays, so she sees me, she's happy because she knows it's Wednesday, she's getting paid. And I tell her, I said, unabashedly and very shamelessly, I tell her, I said, listen, I want this and that and the other, and you can throw in this and that extra because, Saturday is my birthday. To which she smiles real big and she goes, it's my birthday too.
Really?
It's cool.
Wow.
And I've been going there and seeing her for months.
That's interesting.
So we have the same birthday. And
There you go.
apparently so does Eugene and I.
There you go. So I want to get to your life as a public figure since that move back to Tampa, and which has happened a great deal. And I also want to get to where your chief work has been done, which has been in the Tampa Native Show, and what you have done there in what I see as preservation work, and also making Tampa very aware of its history of being Tampeños.
Thank you.
And so let's talk a little bit about the Tampa Native Show.
So in 2009, I went to a mixer at Blue Martini at the International Mall, and I met a gentleman by the name of Steve Canella. Steve was born 2 years after me. He graduated in high school in 1978, Hillsborough High School. And probably the antithesis of my personality, right? So if I'm the extrovert on the outside edge of that, all of that, Stevie's the opposite, right? Stevie is completely quiet and painfully shy, but we share a love of Tampa history. Now, Stevie's history is even deeper than mine. His mom was from Texas, but his father is of Sicilian heritage here. Went to Hillsborough High School, was a starting quarterback at Hillsborough High School, graduated in 1950, and Tampa is in Steve's blood like it was in mine.
Sure.
So we started to kind of pal around a little bit. Stevie started a Facebook page in 2009 called Tampa Natives. It was a repository for stories. It wasn't going anywhere. Stevie let me be a co-administrator, and together we grew the page into a behemoth. Really, I mean, it went
Right.
from 60 to 600 to 6,000
it
members.
exploded, right?
It really did. And
Yeah.
we came up with the catchphrase. Do you remember? Do you remember Tampa Highlight? Do you remember Shakey's Pizza? Do you remember Huddle's Corner? And people started to gravitate towards it because what we found out is that nostalgia really plays, and people want to talk about those old days as they get older, and those become more precious, those memories. I had some public access television experience in production, so I conceived of a television show, live television show called, appropriately enough, The Tampa Native Show. I took a page off of Larry King's playbook and I made it a call-in show where we put a phone on the desk and people would call in and we'd pick a topic and they'd share their memories. I came up with a tagline, The Tampa Native Show, where sharing your memories has never been this much fun. And 15 years later and over 900 shows later and 2 awards later, the show is still in production.
Amazing.
It's morphed a little bit, Joey, and you've been on the show many, many times.
Yes, I have.
It's morphed from a fond remembrance and look back at an early days in Tampa, whether it was the television shows that we watched on Friday nights and the cartoons that we watched on Saturday mornings, to the places we went and the people that we saw, to now being a historic preservation project, because what we're realizing again,
Yes.
what the old Mario would tell the young Mario is, do it all, brother, don't leave, don't waste an at-bat, don't waste a day of it. Try to get those stories before they leave us.
Absolutely. And I sort of see it a little bit like the project called StoryCorps, where
That was the other
where
inspiration.
people are interviewed.
Exactly.
And if you are a fan of a certain era of history like the Civil War, boy, imagine what it would be like to talk to a guy who was in the Civil War.
Amazing.
And so that's what I see your show doing. And what I have to tell you, that when I first interacted, way back when I first met you, and I interacted with you over this, I was very, I don't know if I want to use the word impressed. I was just very amazed that this resource was happening in the community, and a lot of my friends didn't know about it.
I like to think that it's spawned other activities that's very similar. There's a group in West Tampa that's trying to do some preservation and capture audio recorded history. And, if they say imitation's the highest point of flattery, I guess that's a flattery, something imitation and flattery. I don't know how that goes right now. But I'm not jealous at all. In fact, I'm proud and I'm very honored that these other entities have popped up to try to do similar stuff, because I don't care. The end result is, it doesn't matter how we win the game as long as we win. And in this case, it doesn't matter how we preserve our precious history, just as long as we preserve it, because it deserves that preservation.
Yes.
And there are a lot of people in the community that are working real hard, whether it's the African-American community, the Hispanic community, the Jewish community, to preserve our history, because it's going away little by little by little. It's going away.
Yes, it is. And that's part of the advent of not only what's happening in our entire society nationally, but particularly Florida, because, it's a developer's haven. And so, yes,
Let
it's
me
very
say
important.
that if anybody would like to kind of peruse the archives, the recent archives with the Tampa Native Show, and see some interviews with some very, very important people, some of which who have left us recently, you can see it at Tampa Bay Arts and Education Network on their website, tbae.net. tbae.net, and then just search out the Tampa Native Show. There's probably 500 shows on there that you can see, and before that we had them archived and recorded, but one of these days soon, Joey, I'm going to put together the entire montage of shows, because some of the early shows are amazing.
Of course.
We used to dress up. We had so much fun. And you said StoryCorps earlier. Those were the two media inspirations for me. I combined StoryCorps with Larry King Live, and that's what brought us to the Tampa Native Show.
So in the last 120 seconds
Yes,
we
sir.
have left, do we have anybody that we need to address? No. So let me say this.
Please.
What would you like to say in closing?
Thank you all for indulging us today. I wish we had another hour, because I can talk another hour at least about, not just about me, but about Tampa and Tampa history. And I know that we do the show here in Tampa, and it's broadcast over 7 counties, and we're just so fortunate to be able to bring you this show each and every week. We will continue to honor our Hispanic culture and heritage this month, as is our mission.
And I want to say something, is I want to let everybody out there know that the way I see you as a friend and as a cohort and as a partner in this show is that you are someone who really deeply cares about the things that you deeply care about. And that's why the Tampa Natives Show, and that's why Tempeños are important in your life.
Thank you, Joey.
Yes. All right. Let me take care of this. As always, special thanks to Jessica, the OG of our board. She is wonderful. Thank you to Joe Remo, who's on the phones. And then coming up next, it's
Who's coming up next?
Music Wednesday with Sam I Am.
Let me finish. I'll just throw this over the top and say, listen, thank you guys each and every week for coming and listening and chiming in and sharing your thoughts with us. We really do appreciate it. We enjoy this and look forward to it each and every week. And next week, we're going to have another guest and we're going to continue the conversation.
There you go. Have a great day, folks.
You're listening to WMNF Tampa.